We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
You might compare the world's increasingly complex relationship with Russia to a game of chess, and history has arguably seen no more formidable chess player than Garry Kasparov, described by the New York Times as Vladimir Putin's chess master nemesis. At the age of 22, he became the youngest ever world chess champion, leading the rankings for almost 2 decades. Among his many records, one he might rather forget, losing a match to a computer, IBM's Deep Blue, in 1997. Kasparov retired from the game in 2005, becoming a prominent figure in opposition politics in Putin's Russia. He planned to run for president, but was forced to withdraw on a technicality. In 2013, Kasparov left Russia, possibly for good, fearing arrest in a government crackdown on the opposition. He launched a campaign for president of the world chess governing body FIDE, but earlier this month Kasparov lost that bid, beaten by the long-time incumbent, the Putin-backed Kirsan Ilumzhinov. For the chess legend, largely unaccustomed to defeat, it seemed Kremlin forces had won again. And today Garry Kasparov talks to Al Jazeera. Thank you, Mr. Kasparov, for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thanks for inviting me.
I want to start by talking about your bid for the presidency of the world chess governing body FIDE, ultimately, of course, unsuccessful as a result of that vote here in Tromsø a few days ago. What would it have meant to you to have taken the administrative reins of chess, having spent so many years in command of the game as a player?
For me, it would be an opportunity, or it was an opportunity, to make chess a household game around the world. I believe chess has huge potential. There are plenty of opportunities, both on the charitable side, to promote the game of chess, and also to attract corporate sponsorship. I've been dreaming about creating a platform that will unite educational aspects of the game of chess, technology, and social network. I was dreaming about FIDE being turned into a giant social network, working horizontally rather than vertical as today. I think that there is the appetite in the corporate world for new intellectual products, for the game that could attract different people, different groups of customers, if you look at it from a business perspective, and the game with impeccable qualities. And also it was an opportunity to demonstrate that the international sport federations could be governed openly, transparently, democratically, so to clean up the atmosphere that has been surrounding lately IOC, FIFA, and other major sport governing bodies. So I think that it was a great opportunity for the world of chess to lead the way for a better, brighter future.
Sadly, of course, for now at least, an opportunity lost. But let me ask you about problems at the heart of FIDE. After that election, I was speaking to Nigel Short, the British Grand Master. He described it to me as the dirtiest campaign in 20 years. He spoke of corruption at the heart of the current administration. He alleged bribery and deceit in the voting process. What's that all about? I mean, this is hardly the image one associates with a game, a sport like chess.
I made a conscious decision at the beginning of the campaign to be on the positive side. So there were plenty of opportunities to trash Mr. Ilumzhinov and his cronies for all they did in the past. Mr. Ilumzhinov's biography, contains so many looming targets for the attacks, like his beliefs in aliens and meetings with late Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, and quite recently with Bashar al-Assad, basically serving as a Kremlin envoy. So at the critical points in his relations with dictators. And of course, numerous cases where the deceitful policies and corruption were quite apparent for independent observers. But I wanted to stay on my message. So I will change the world of chess. I will bring sponsorship. I will do things differently. And I don't want to talk about the past. It's all about the future. So that was the conscious choice. Considering the result and the atmosphere, probably it was a wrong choice because many federations, and it's not just federations in developing countries. We can also point out many European federations that were resistant to this change, to this message of change. It seems that for many people who have been staying in power on their federations for a long time, and Ilham Zhinov's 19 years is not a record because in some federations you have people staying there for even for longer. They instinctively they didn't want this change to happen, and at the last minute, I realized that with all the good stories and even with real money coming in, there was still a strong resistance. I would say rejection of the very notion of change, and of course we had other factors. It was a big political issue for Kremlin. Every Russian embassy in the world has been involved. We had here the president of the Russian Chess Federation, they call him Oligarch Light, the man with significant financial resources, Andrei Filatov, who has been spending your time and naturally was finding convincing arguments for delegates that wanted to hear this language.
You raise the Kremlin. This vote was characterized in part as a contest between you and the Kremlin on some level. Seeing the end of Vladimir Putin's time in office has become something of a personal goal. You retired from chess in 2005 as a player, devoted yourself to stoking the embers of opposition politics in Russia. You even planned to run for the presidency. And for a time, at the end of 2011, early 12, it seemed that something was happening with big mass anti-Putin rallies. Why do you think it all eventually came to nothing?
Oh, that's probably a more complicated story than the story of FIDE, because it's not just entirely black and white. The anti-Putin rallies united different people, but they were not all determined to go all the way down the road just to fight. So what actually brings together these two stories, if we can talk about Kremlin and FIDE, that is the reason these people survive, because they fight to the very end. They fight for life. They have no life outside of power. Mr. Ilham Zhinov has nowhere to go, and of course Mr. Putin has nowhere to go. Technically, Mr. Ilham Zhinov could have some options in his life. Putin doesn't have any options.
Mr. Ilham Zhinov, the head of FIDE.
The head of FIDE, yes. He has. For Putin, it's staying in power. It's basically staying alive. And for many of his cronies, it's the same. So to win such a battle, you need many determined people willing to take the risk, facing a dictator who is desperate in his desire to cling to power. We didn't have the same passion in the crowd. So people wanted change, but they didn't think that they had to take a huge risk because they didn't recognize that the alternative would be horrible. So I think that the collapse of this anti-Putin movement that peaked in late 2011 or 2012 still had a scar on Russian political landscape, and it forced Putin to move further down the road to the most reactionary conservative forces in Russian politics. And I think somehow it made the Crimea-Ukraine tragic story inevitable, because searching for new foundation for his power, that's what happens with every dictator. After 15 years, you have to come up with new mythology. And the economy was no longer offering an excuse because it didn't encourage ordinary Russian middle class to stay behind him. Putin ended up, wearing only one hat, ultra-nationalist, trying to ignite this sentiments, imperial sentiments. And it worked temporarily in Crimea because it was easy, quick, and bloodless. But now I think it's a moment of truth. Just we be able to face it, because Putin is squeezed between hammer and hot place. To continue his assault on Ukraine, it means more sanctions and total isolation. To withdraw support from these terrorists that have been thrown there means to lose all support in Russia that has been propped by the 24/7 TV propaganda.
You've paid a pretty heavy personal price for your efforts during those years. You've left Russia effectively in fear, as you've said, of returning because you suspect you might be arrested or at least taken in for questioning on various levels. You are portrayed in the official media as a pariah, where once you were a hero. The suggestion is you're too friendly with the West, that you've taken the passport of another country. Does this hurt you? Does this affect you, this negative image of Garry Kasparov in Russia today?
No, it's negative image of Garry Kasparov in Putin's Russia is normal. So I would be more concerned by the positive image in Putin's propaganda. I did what I believe was right. And yes, I paid a heavy price. Yes, I had to leave the country. Yes, my mother, my son's still there. And it's difficult for me, so just it was difficult to reorganize my life and just to relocate. Yes, I got a passport of another country, Croatia, because I had no other choice, because I had to travel, and I'm grateful to the Croatian government to help me at that such difficult moment. But I have nothing to regret, because I did the right things. I always stood firm, fighting for what I believe was right, and I don't think that this regime will last forever. We don't know when it ends, but that's the destiny of these regimes. Everything can happen overnight. So as we know from other places, I hope it will not be as tragic as it could be, because the revolutions in Russia always caused tremendous problems, both for our country and for the rest of the world. But I'm hopeful that the latest events, no matter how tragic they are, I mean Ukraine, and the bloodshed there, will send a wake-up signal to many Russians, because they have been drugged by this propaganda, and Putin's regime cannot instill more drugs, because it will be just eventually rejected. You can't stretch this line by lying and lying and lying and coming up with some most fantastic stories about Ukraine that have nothing to do with reality, which is 21st century. I don't think this propaganda will work for long.
Let me pick up on Ukraine. You're a prolific user of Twitter. Your tweets sometimes mix chess with politics. As in this example about the West's response to Russia over Ukraine, you wrote, "We say in chess that the threat is stronger than the execution. Only true in politics if you have credibility to back up the threat." Do you feel that the West's response to Russia has been inadequate so far?
Yeah, that tweet was tweeted quite a long time ago. So I think that now the West has recognized that Vladimir Putin will not recognize any language but language of strengths, and they have to be the West should be forceful to protect Ukraine and maybe other Eastern European countries, former Soviet republics like Baltic states. Unfortunately, the recognition of the truth came to the Western leaders too late, and losing credibility in Syria, and actually if we go back to the time of the Russian aggression against Georgia, so losing credibility in every important geopolitical issue, and always backing off when Putin bluffed and raised the stakes, convinced Putin that he could do whatever. And lack of almost, yeah, not like, but the lack of the proper response to Crimea, to annexation of Crimea, Anschluss, something that Europe hasn't seen since late 30s, also sent signal to Putin that he could continue his quest for collecting territories that he believed had to be part of new Russian Empire. But as it's happened in the 30s, at a certain point there was no chance but to fight back. And I believe now there's a clear recognition of this division. And Putin's actions, as banning the agricultural export from EU and the food and industrial items from the United States and Australia, Japan. So I think it demonstrates that he will not play by the rules if he's not happy with that. So he will always, turn the board around and can throw the pieces. It seems to me that the international community as a whole now is quite tired of Putin's eccentric, if you may use this diplomatic word, behavior.
Well, let me throw another tweet at you, and this is also something you've said more than once in the past. Putin is a Russian problem, but if you don't act soon, he'll be your problem. What would you do? Where do you think his weak point is?
Now, let's agree that now he is everybody's problem, and that's what happens with dictators from the big countries when they have resources to cause troubles around the world. I think his weakest point is money. It's not militarily, because nobody is willing to start, a real war, because Russia is nuclear power. But Putin's strength was always based on his ability to throw cash into the game. Russia, thanks to the high oil and gas prices, earned enormous fortune. Of course, most of this in the hands of the few oligarchs close to Putin, but basically Putin controls financial resources probably more than any other individual in the history of human race. And his ability to keep Russian middle class and population as a whole quiet by throwing small goodies here and there, so that's helped him to keep the balance. It seems to me that sanctions on both sides will create quite a damage for this idyllic picture in Putin's Russia. Actually, it's the first time when Putin did something that will inevitably cause frustration among Russian middle class, because people didn't want to go too far protesting against fake parliamentary elections, the limitation of freedom of speech. That was too far. It was not in part of their daily routine. But see the inevitable rise of the food prices, also the shorter list of available products in the stores, and also now quite serious restrictions on use of internet, on privacy. Just you have to download public Wi-Fi, now you have to register. So I think will create frustrations that may lead to quite strong protest of this crowd, of the millions of people who so far remained indifferent to the political problems. So pushing further with the sanctions and limiting access of Putin's oligarchs and other financial institutions in Russia to the financial markets, and staying firm on Ukraine, naturally helping Ukraine to build an army to resist any further attempts to destroy its territorial integrity. Those are things that are to be done, and I believe that even the European countries that were reluctant at the first stage to move in this direction, now they they recognize that there's simply no other choice.
Let's leave politics and move on to another clear passion of yours, the work of your foundation, the Kasparov Chess Foundation, working around the world to promote chess as an educational tool, with a particular focus now on Africa. What is it that inspires you in particular about your foundation's work in Africa?
Africa is a continent that needs most of support. I believe that talent exists everywhere, and it's all about an opportunity presented to people on the ground. My foundation started in the United States, moved to Europe, also is functioning in Singapore and then in Mexico City, just we began our work there. But Africa was probably the most successful story because we succeeded in raising considerable funds from private donors to support our activities there. And I was very happy to see the positive response from many African nations. I've been traveling extensively across Africa, and it seems to me that our work there brings most results because people are really grateful to see us helping them, and there is a real appetite for change. There is appetite to learn. So, and I have to say that I feel very comfortable by working there in this, just among different African nations. My foundation in Africa is headquartered in Johannesburg, but last year or so I visited more than 20 African countries.
Do you miss playing chess at World Championship level, Garry?
No, it's behind me, so I don't look back. So you can get dizzy, and also I understand the limitations of my ability now to move the chess pieces at the professional level. Still play chess at the exhibitions, so I play simultaneous exhibitions during my tours. I play a little bit on the internet, but naturally I do not fit to play 6 hours professional chess at the top level because the concentration level today is not sufficient for a lengthy intellectual competition.
You're still very involved in chess, of course. You're a prolific writer of books. You've been a
absolutely.
mentor to a lot of players, including, of course, the young world champion now, Magnus Carlsen. He, you've described as a force of nature. He has equaled your record of becoming the world's youngest champion at 22. He did it as well. Do you think he has the ability to one day be described, as you are now, as the greatest living chess player ever?
Look, I believe that chess needs new stars, and Magnus definitely is absolutely unique player, and I'll be very happy to see him beating all the records. So he already had high ratings that I had I had before, and even considering the inflation, is still a phenomenal achievement, and he keeps surprising us. So that's why I don't think that Magnus yet reached his peak. Sky's the limit, so that's why we can watch new great accomplishments, and it's for the rest to actually crown him as the greatest player. I'll be quite happy to see that the chess is not stagnating. So it's not Bobby Fischer or Garry Kasparov. We need new stars because I'm looking in the future, and I think that the game of chess is yet to speak its last words. So the game has long history, at least 1,500 years. And it's amazing to see how this ancient game survived and still is booming at the time of these new technologies.
Finally, what about your greatest accomplishment? Do you think it was behind you, or do you think it might yet be to come?
I don't know. It's hard to beat the moment when I won the world title, but I still believe that if you want to make the difference, there are still plenty of opportunities, and I always remain an optimist that my energy, my experience will help me to conquer a new mountain.
Garry Kasparov, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.